Our discussion is a father and his work. A father and his work. Let's start with the idea father. We are referring to somebody who has a biological child or an adopted child of whatever adoption style. And we are talking about how, as a father, you are expected to work. It's actually difficult for you to be a father if you don't work, because the child expects you to be giving them the support they require. Children don't work. So it is the father to work so that the child can survive. So fathers and work is an obvious relationship, because how would you call yourself a father and you are not working? Of course, these days you are hearing of people where the wife is the one who works, and the man hardly brings anything. So the wife has to look both after the children and after their father. But we want to emphasize today the fact that God does expect men to be providers. In other words, to work and provide. We'll be looking at today at work as a way of worship. Then we'll be looking at work as a way of service. And we'll thirdly be looking at work and the family on the third month, God giving us time. So today we want to talk about the theology of work. What does the Bible say about work? And in the process, we hope we'll establish that it's expected of every father to actually work. Let me just say, read the introduction as part of this, that work is not voluntary, it's a command. In fact, he says, if you don't work, die. Thessalonians exactly puts it, very good language. If you don't work, don't eat. And obviously, if you don't eat, you will die. It means that we as fathers then would be certainly be disobedient to God. That we are saying work is a way of worship. Why? When you obey God's command to work, you are worshiping Him. You are giving glory to Him. And I think that's something that will be important for us to have at the back of our mind. Number two, work is worship, not just because it's in response to God's command, but like I'll be saying a little later, work is a way of being like God. God worked, we also work. And we are created in His image, therefore, we are expected to be working. So when you don't work, you are actually not acting like God. Therefore, you are not in worshiping. The chief responsibility of man is to show godliness to God's creation, to manage the creation on behalf of God. So when you talk about worship, what is worship? Worship is telling God He is worthy of respect, worthy of our respect in every way. And when He is worship is worthiness, then we mean that we must do that which will bring glory to God. And the work is what? Laziness and idleness is certainly a way of showing you don't fear God, you don't care about God's intentions. But you know, like I'm saying in my introduction, it's God who has actually given us work. But unfortunately, the average person doesn't think like that. The average person, his understanding of work is he works so that he can earn a living. So, go ahead as God come in. My job is to earn a living. Unfortunately, if you only work to earn a living, then chances are within a short time you'll earn enough, especially those who are very gifted and are have gifts that are in high demand. Within a short time you'll earn enough money to actually last the rest of your lifetime. So if you are working only to earn a living, then you will not need to work many years. And that's why some people even talk about you work for until you age 40, then after that what? But God's instructions are if you don't work, don't eat. So there's no time when you're expected to stop working if you want to work in obedience to God. So this idea of thinking you work only to earn a living is not a way of respecting what God's instructions. Another one says, I work so that I can take care of my family. Again, that part is true. But how long do you have your family? For me and my age mate in our 70s, you don't see the family around you. And if God blesses them and they are looking after themselves, obviously, then why will you work? And that's why you find some people become idle after their children become adults. They become dependents and they end up becoming drunkards because they had the wrong idea about work. They thought they work in order to look after their family. So once the family is now in adulthood, they just idle. And it's Gattere, the late Gattere, who said, with that kind of concept, you normally will be dead within 3 years after retirement. And those days, the retirement was 55. He was saying the average retirees die by 57, 58. They are dead. With the wrong, if your concept of work is simply to look after your family, then once your family is, and they become adults very early, in the sense that last Sunday I was speaking at Southeastern University, and and I was telling them I was in the Bible study coordinator of the CU over 50 years ago, and of course mentioning their parents who are not born. So what does that tell you? By the time you are 50, 51, 52, you have actually finished your job of looking after your family. So what do? Some others say that they work so that they make money. In other words, and those ones at least are likely to work for a long time. But then sometimes your money will start doing. You have even heard of rich dad saying that you reach a level where your money will do the working. So what do? Become idle. And idle hands and idle minds at the devil's workshop. That's what happened to David. Once he was so successful at the time of war, he stayed at home. And that's how he ended up seeing a woman called the wife, Mrs. Uriah. And he ended up destroying the rest of his life was in a lot of trouble because he thought he had actually succeeded and conquered. My friend, that's not a good reason. You know, most of us, if this is a concept we have, the emphasis is usually on time spent in exchange for monetary reward. That's what we have in mind. I do this, I get this. That's what we are really talking about. But some others look at it differently. They look at work as a necessary evil. In other words, their choice would have been to be idle and do nothing. But now that they have to earn a living, then they say it's a necessary evil. They look at work as a necessary evil. But work is not evil. If it's going to be a worship of God, worship means doing something God that pleases God, then it cannot be evil. You know, some other people just think it's a way of occupying our time, to occupy us until retirement. Then what happens in retirement? You know, the word retirement is not a biblical word. You're expected to work until your body does not allow you to work anymore. Employment, yes, you retire from employment. Work, you don't ever retire from work. Sometimes it may even appear meaningless. This idea of work is meaningless and laborious. So we keep yearning. When shall we stop? When shall we retire? So that we can pass time in leisurely pursuits. If that is what you have in mind, then you don't have the idea of work as worship. Let me say a few more things. Still talking about the workplace. You wake up every morning and you feel like getting a headache. Why? The place is stressful. Why is it stressful? Because you have the wrong reason for working. You become very stressed. I wish I had enough time, but I've written quite a bit. All I'm saying are in my book. A leader's work ethics. So if you're able to contact Scripture Union, my distributor, or go to Amazon and you can get a digital copy from Amazon, or go to my website and there's some free material on work. If you check my materials in my website is www.johngaga.org. You'll see I've spent a bit of time. But work is not supposed to be stressful. When you see what you are doing, you are serving the Lord, there will be challenges at work, but you know God is with you. You know, part of the reason why it is stressful is because there's too much politics in the workplace. And you become part of it. Some of those terms they use is backstabbing. What's backstabbing? You smile to the person, then when you go to the boss, you tell him this guy should be fired. Yet you are his friend. And that can get very stressful. But when you realize that you are working to honor God, you know that He protects your back. Some others, because of desiring to get promotion, they get involved in bootlicking. What is bootlicking? It is, beyond doing your assignment, is trying to do good things to the boss so that he can turn his eye to you and give you promotion. It's called bootlicking. A Christian can't do that because he knows promotion either comes from the east or from the west. It comes from the Lord. So as he works, he has at the back of his mind the fact that he is serving the Lord. That is Colossians chapter 3, verse 23. Also, this idea of blame games. Oh, this so and so gave me trouble. We Christians find it easy to admit where they are wrong and ask for forgiveness. They are also not involved in competition. One of the worst things that happens at work is comparison and competition. Why can't you work and compete against yourself rather than compete against others? In other words, every day you must be sure you did what honors God. And whether people think you are doing great or not, the important thing is, did you do your very best? It doesn't bother you how others are performing if you know you did your very best. Even if you don't get promotion, you are still aware that God will give you promotion at the right time. So you are not involved in competition that creates the stress at the place of work. Sometimes you have so much pressure to deliver and to succeed. And all of it has to do with because you are looking at human beings as the one you are working for. And of course, that whole issue about competition for top places in the pyramid, because the pyramid gets narrower and narrower. So pressure and stress become worse and worse until work is all consuming and you start forgetting everything else. You forget your family, you forget your wife, you forget your parents. You have no time for them because it's all consuming. All because you have the wrong idea about work. So don't bring yourself to end up with the medical issues because of having the wrong view of work. Let me quote somebody called Shoemaker. He says, by the way, Shoemaker, E.F. Shoemaker is the author of Good Work and Small is Beautiful, a study of economics as if people matter, is what the book is called. I quote, if for an employer work is simply an item of cost to be reduced to a minimum, if it cannot be eliminated altogether by automation, for the workman to work is to make a sacrifice of one's leisure and comfort, and wages are kind of compensation for the sacrifice. Whether you are looking at the employer's angle or from employee angle, that is not, you don't go to work as an act of worship when that's what you have in mind. So we need, in order for work to be worship, work objective should be go beyond what I get for myself to where how it pleases God. Let me quote Alexander Harvard. To enable him to overcome his ego-centeredness by joining, people go to work as a means to develop themselves as persons, to serve others, to find a sense of meaning in their work. In other words, here, Alexander is actually saying that we don't just go to work to earn money, but in order to have opportunity to develop yourself, yes, that's for you, but in order to serve others. That's what is making you. And when you start turning to work as a way of serving others, that's what worship is all about. Or back to Schumacher, work is a way of to enable you to overcome your ego centeredness by joining with other people as a common task. In other words, work gives you opportunity to see yourself as a part of a wider group, and therefore have less self-centeredness. You know, the best organization to be in, I guess, are the busiest ones, like Mr. Hardy says, as long as they are busy for someone else. The worst are those that are obsessed with their own innards. In other words, the good place to work is where they are not thinking about the shareholders' profit alone. They are thinking about serving the customers and serving the staff. We all, it seems, need a purpose beyond ourselves to make the best of ourselves. So, the notion of service is the notion of worship. The Buddhist view takes the function of work to be at least threefold, according to Buddha. Number one, to give a man a chance to utilize and develop his faculties. Number two, to enable him to overcome his ego-centeredness by joining with other people, like we saw earlier. Number three, to bring forth the goods and services needed for a becoming existence. That's what Buddha would say. And once one accepted that man was created by God with a designated purpose, the politics, economics, and art had value only for the end of helping man reach a higher plan of existence, which should be his goal. So once you start seeing God in your work, then you see work as a means of worshiping him. You know, mature human beings seek not only a decent salary and an interesting things to do, but also, number one, the means to develop themselves as persons. You want to be what God created you to be to his glory. You want your life to count, to make an impact in serving others. And you want, therefore, in the process, to find meaning in your work. I've given this story before. From the time I had it, I have repeated many times about this guy. If you know something about Europe, the old big buildings are all to do with cathedrals, because Europe was being run by the Pope. So any building you're talking about 500 years ago, the best building would always be a cathedral. So there is this tourist who went at a time when a cathedral was being built, and there used to be maybe one cathedral per country. And he went to the big structure. So he went to one corner and found a mason, somebody, a bricklayer, and asked him, "What are you doing?" Obviously, they could see what he was doing. The bricklayer just did not even look up. He just said, "I'm just laying bricks," because he was actually putting one brick on top of another. Can you imagine if that is your view of work, just putting one brick on top of another? When you woke up in the morning, would you be in a hurry to go to work? These are the people who are only working for money to meet their needs. There's no excitement in the work. If it's going to be worship, it must go beyond just laying bricks to finding out what are you laying bricks about. Anyway, this guy went to another corner and found another bricklayer or mason and asked him, "What are you doing?" This one stopped working, stood up and looked at him and says, "I am building a cathedral." Can you see the difference between bricklayer 1 and 2? Bricklayer 1 does not think about the totality of what he's doing. He just thinks about one brick on top of the other. The next one is already getting excited by the fact that he will be telling his grandchildren, "Do you see that cathedral? I was a part of it. I helped to build that cathedral." He is looking forward to enjoying his old age after the cathedral is actually completed. Can you see him waking up in the morning, excited, and not even patient enough for the completion of the cathedral? He wants to do and work as fast as possible to ensure the cathedral is complete, because he's looking at it. If you are going to look at work as worship, we must not do work that has no meaning. We must do work that is going to bring something that will be meaningful. That's why it's not enough to just work. For example, when I left campus, 50 years less, I think, less than about two and a half years remaining to make 50 years since I left campus. I remember being in the Faculty of Commerce as a notes board, and they were advertising jobs, many. But the one that were highest paying, it was BRAs and BAT. And I still remember a non-Christian finding me looking at the breweries one. He said, Nganga, what are you doing? This is not for you. And he's a non-Christian, but he knew I should not be looking at the brewery's job, although the one paying more. Why? He had seen me for the whole university life talking about him, about Christ, and about wanting to worship God. He said, that's not the job that can help you. That's why a Christian does not do a job just because it brings money. Money, yes. Like you hear some people who work for breweries will tell you, me, I'm an accountant. Not understanding the reason you are doing accounting is so that more beer can be sold. The reason for accounting is so that you can increase in volumes. A friend of mine used to be the sales manager, and then he got saved. Deputy sales manager, then he got saved. And then what would happen is that on the weekend, he has been telling people to get born again and stop drinking. For the other 5-6 days, those days he used to work for 6 days, he is busy telling people or looking for strategies and pushing his salesmen to sell more alcohol. One day he just looked at it and wait a minute. I know I'm earning a lot as a deputy sales manager, but I can't, the conflict within me is impossible. I can't do this anymore. So he went to the boss and said, I'm resigning. He said, for what? My conscience can't allow me to work here. So, where are you going? I have no idea. I have no job. All I know, I cannot work here. Please, this is my notice. This is my notice letter. So he gave his notice without knowing where he was going, trusting God to provide for him. But before he left the company, he tells me he finally got another sales manager's job with a cosmetic company where he would be able to say, I'm helping to make God's women beautiful. So you need to understand that if you are really going to have a work as worship, it is not the money you are getting. It is what you're doing daily. How is it benefiting God's people? How is it benefiting God's people? This guy thought, wow, I'm Peter Cathedral. He saw the completeness. My job, that job, the other job, we are all working to complete a cathedral. What are you doing, however small? How is it up to them? What's the reason for your business? What's the reason for your place of employment? Why does it exist? If the reason it exists is not something you can align with, then you cannot be a worshiper and stay there. But anyway, that was the second guy. The tourist moved to the third guy. When he moved to the third guy, he asked him, same question, what are you doing? This one stood up, started smiling, and he says, I'm depopulating hell, I'm populating heaven. In other words, this guy did not just see a cathedral. He saw the bishop behind the pulpit, telling people to trust in God. And he felt that it is his laying of the bricks that will help the cathedral to be complete and people to go to heaven. He saw himself as an evangelist, yet he's only laying bricks. Let me ask you, do you see your work as having benefit to the people on earth, but in a way, using that same work as a way of helping people to go to heaven? In which way? You know, let's be clear. According to the book of Acts, chapter 1, verse 8, all of us are commissioned. If you are to worship as a Christian, one requirement is you ask the Holy Spirit to come into you. When He comes to you, Acts 1 8, you become a witness. An evangelist, that a calling. Witness is for every Christian. Just look at Acts 1 8 and then look at verse 15. The people became witnesses were not just the 12 apostles, there were 120 of them. So it means that if you are going to take work as worship, then you must see yourself as a witness in your workplace. Yes, how do you witness? Not by during office hours, going to preach during office hours. It's by the way you do your job. And people start saying, how come you work like this? How come you are treated badly yet you continue working? In answering the question, you start witnessing. But the witness was provoked by the way you work. In addition to utilizing the opportunities to reach out to your contact with the gospel. Because once you do a good job, you gain friends, you gain contacts. Then outside office hours, you become a witness. So your work becomes a worship because it's the work that is opening opportunities. Your work as an auditor, engineer, doctor should assist rather than hinder your witness. And that's why very few of us should be pastors. Most of us should do other things other than pastoring so that our job becomes a vehicle for witness. That's how you become a witness. And I'll be referring to this again when I talk about serving. But the question we really need to answer is work a curse? Is work a curse? And that's a very important thing to answer. I'll be allowing time for discussion, so I'll not take forever. Look at Genesis chapter 3, verse 17. To Adam, he said, because you listened to your wife and ate from the tree about which I commanded you, you must not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil, you will eat food from it all the days of your life. It will produce thorns and thistles for you, and you'll eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your brow, you'll eat your food until you return to the ground. Since from it you are taken, for dust you are, and to dust you will return. That is a passage used in order to call work a curse. But please understand, yes, the ground has been cursed. But is that where work began? Go back to chapter 2, before the fall of man. And we read in verse 15, and the Lord God took the man, Adam, and put him in the Garden of Eden. To do what? To do work in it and take care of it. In other words, work was ordained before the fall. Some people think that if man had not fallen, there would be no work. But please read clearly. Before the fall, man was already working in the garden. What happened is after the fall, the work was made more difficult. But working is God created man with a capacity to work. So when you talk about work as worship, it is doing what God created you to do, and He created you to work. Let me repeat. Man was created with a creative nature because he is created by God. So when a man does not work, because what is to work? To work is to modify what God has already created. If it is a seed, you are able to farm it and you can produce more potatoes, whatever. But basically it's God who has created the potatoes. God is a creator. Because you are created in God's image, to worship God means like Him, to look around your environment and see how you can multiply the things God has created. That's why you cannot enjoy your life if you have no opportunity to do things that help to improve your surroundings. Man or woman only feels fulfilled when he works. What does he do in working? To change things, to be creative. And you need to see that the best job you can do is a job that is not just monotonous. It gives you opportunity to think, opportunity to improve things, opportunity to increase production. That's what you are created for. And you can see, even before the fall, that was already happening. And you need to come to where you start seeing work as God ordained. God works to get fulfillment, not just to earn money. In other words, God's people work in order to get fulfillment, not just to earn money. Of course, you get money in the process, because when you are meeting people's needs, they want to pay you because you have met their needs. But what excites you more is the fact that you have met their needs. That's what God has put in us. What excites us is to do things that become useful to others. That's why we work. Not the other reasons I saw earlier. Those follow, but they are the smaller items. The main reason we work is because God has created us with the capacity to work, with the capacity to be creative, and when we do, we end up, in the evening we are tired, but happy. We sleep happily because of the things we actually did. That's why you need to do work where you feel you are using your creative capacity, and that you are doing things that will help improve what God has created, and it's actually useful to others. Man was created with a creative nature, I've just said. That's why he only fulfills when he works. So, my brother, do you work to get fulfillment, or you just work for money? In Matthew chapter 25, the story of the talents, we learn that the talented people were blessed not for the amount of work they did, but because they were faithful in what they did. In other words, God, and please look at verse 21 and then verse 23 of Matthew chapter 25. You'll see the guy who came with the 10, the one who came with the 4, all of them got the same commendation. Well done, good and faithful servant. So you need to understand, God is not looking at, I produce more than you, I got a better grade more than you. He is looking at, but was I faithful? In other words, if you talk to the student world, I got a B plus. You only got a C plus. But God may be saying the reason you got a B plus is because you are lazy. Should have gotten an A. So he is happy with me a C plus, because he's not looking at the output as much as he's looking at, was I faithful? Did I do my best? Did I apply my brain? Faithfulness to your mission, diligence should concern you more than output. For output follows how faithful you are to what God has called you and the gifts God has given you. What are we saying? Both the means at the end matter to God, not just the end. Oh, I'm rich. How did you get the riches? Oh, I got an A. How did you get an A? If work is to be worshipped, it means that the means you followed are means that honored God, even as the output honored God. God blesses the work of our hands. He doesn't bless conmen, where you are playing games in order to make money. Worship means you earned a living. You did not get free money. You actually worked and made a difference for people, and that's why they are paying. Just before I finish, I want to talk about the Protestant work ethics. Max Weber, the German economic sociologist, coined the term for the new beliefs about work, calling it the Protestant work ethic. It is claimed, in fact, you can research on this one, that theology of work that the Protestants, Calvin, Luther, the Protestants got into, changed the world. You see, when you go to North America, the people who went there, they were what we call Puritans. These were people who were not accepting the Catholic faith. They wanted to follow the Bible. So they went there with a new theology of work. And the key elements of this theology was diligence, punctuality, deferment of gratification, and primacy of the work domain. Let's start with diligence. In other words, if you want to talk about work as a worship, then you have to follow the scriptures. And what is diligence? A zealous and careful nature in one's actions and work, exemplified by a decisive work ethic and being careful about how you use your time and monitoring one's own activities to guard against any level of laziness. Then putting forth full concentration in your work. That's what it means by diligence. So, it means that if work is worship, you don't work because your boss is supervising you. You work, the motivation is from within. You don't require external motivation. Because from within, you know God is with you. You are grateful God gave you the job. You will do your very, very best with diligence. And I think that's one of the things that to. By the way, if I not run out of time, we could spend a bit of time here. Are you aware there are more verses against laziness or than against drunkenness? The Bible is totally against laziness. Laziness is a way of not worshiping God. Diligence and working hard, putting your best, is actually a way of worshiping God. That's what the Protestants said. So when you go to work, you don't wait for your supervisor, because you are doing it for God. So you do your very best. That made a difference when they started working. And that's why we are told, because South America was occupied by the nations where the Puritans had not come from. South America, that's why it's called Latin America, it was purely generally Catholic. North America was generally speaking Protestant. And that's why today, North America is the first world, South America is the third world. Yet both parties had come from Europe. Just theology alone, taking work as worship. And because it's worship, you work hard to please God. Even if the boss doesn't recognize your work, you are doing it. And of course, productivity becomes higher. The other thing they said is that if you truly are using work as a way of worship, you must be careful about time, punctuality. Punctuality is the characteristics of being able to complete a required task or fulfill an obligation before or at a previously designated time. Punctual is often used with synonymous with on time. So according to them, if there is a time for planting, you plant on time before the rains come. If there is time for harvesting, you harvest on time. Punctuality to the glory of God. So of course now in Africa we talk about the idea of African time. Man, you can see why we get our poverty. Because the biblical idea is time cannot be wasted by somebody worshiping God. Look at Ecclesiastes 5:4. When you make a vow to God, do not be late in paying it, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. In other words, keeping time, doing what you have said you'll do. Do it. If you're employed and you have signed a job contract, do what the job contract says. Better surpass the requirements than go below it. So on time, keeping time.